The anime begins with Touka Mimori, who is a pathetic, disgusting loser for not eating his meal. He pleads and apologizes repeatedly, but his mother pays him no attention and leads him to the mercy of his stepfather's feet. He suddenly wakes up on a bus, as Sogo Ayaka, the class president, tells Shogo Oyamata to give back her novel. He makes fun of her reading preferences, surprised that she's actually into romance novels despite leading people to believe otherwise. She asks him if there's a problem with her choices and he belittles her, saying he could never read something like that because his brain cells will evaporate. While the scuffle is going on, Takao Hijiri notices that Takao Itsuki, her younger sister, is lost in the mountain scenery outside, but she tells her to pay more attention to what's happening on the bus. Ayaka tells Oyamata to give back her novel, since he isn't interested in it, but he's reluctant to grant her wish. He asks for her social media handle in return for the novel, but she declined his request. The bus was taking the class on their field trip, and while the banter between the president and Oyamata was going on, Touka considered stepping in. Still, he realized he would be too insignificant to do anything effective. He decides to remain indifferent. Just like the Takao sisters and their class teacher, Ayaka asks Oyamata to give back her novel once again, but he insists that she must share her social media handle with him before she can get back her novel. Ayaka remains persistent when Touka suddenly gets up, telling Oyamata to give back her novel. While Oyamata was surprised that Touka stood up for Ayaka, Touka was even more surprised to see himself standing because he didn't know when his body moved on impulse. Oyamata recognizes him, but wonders what gave him the guts to tell him what to do. Touka tries to reason with Oyamata, telling him to give back Ayaka's novel because she's getting annoyed by his mischief. Oyamata laughs off the Touka's show of chivalry, and he wonders where he suddenly got the confidence from. Takuto Kurihara, one of the class elites, tells Oyamata to return Ayaka's novel, but Oyamata, for some support in putting Touka in his place, Takuto tells him he has no interest in such frivolities, and Oyamata is jealous of Takuto's cool aura. Takuto tells him he can ignore Touka, but he must give back Ayaka's novel because it doesn't sit right with him. Asagi Senjo commends Takuto for stepping up for Ayaka, as Oyamata hands over the novel to her. Other students silently commend Takuto for being so nice despite being an elite student. Oyamata takes his seat behind Yasu Tomohiro and he begins kicking his chair from behind, questioning him about what gave Touka the audacity to stand up to him. Yasu quivers in fear, apologizing for his earlier actions, but the teacher cuts in, telling him to quit bothering Yasu. Touka was also surprised that he had the confidence to stand up to Oyamata, and he concluded that his dream was the cause because it put him on edge. While Oyamata complains about his grand moment being ruined by Touka, the goddess chants an incantation which suddenly teleports all the students to a hall. They wonder if they're in some kind of dream, as they all suddenly appear in an unknown location. Goddess Vicious addresses them, welcoming them as heroes to alien her kingdom. She informs them that heroes are summoned to fight the great demon emperor anytime he appears. The demon emperor was once defeated 200 years ago by the combined efforts of heroes, but he was recently resurrected again, prompting the need for the summoning of new heroes. The goddess begs the new heroes from other worlds for their strength to take down such a big threat to her kingdom's prosperity. The students still have a hard time wrapping their heads around what the goddess is trying to say. Their teacher suddenly calms them down, reassuring them that everything will be all right since he's with them. Though he doesn't fully understand their present predicament, he tells them they need to pay attention to whatever the goddess says for clarity. The goddess thanks him for that and he smiles sheepishly, trying to get into her good books. Touka looks around, noting the stone walls, the old-fashioned bonfires, the armored soldiers, and the features of the goddess. Despite all he could see, he still wasn't convinced that they were in another world. Takuto wonders what will happen if they refuse to cooperate, and she tells them that they're stuck there regardless because she can't take them back to their world. Takuto asks her if there's a way back, and she tells them that it can only be done through the reverse summoning event, which requires a special magic element called the evil element. This element can only be obtained from the heart of the great demon emperor or the absorbance of the elements released when the emperor perishes into a special necklace. Oyamata is pissed, wondering what the demon emperor has to do with them because they're from another. The goddess gets on her knees, begging them to act as heroes and become the messiah of everyone in her kingdom. Ayaka explains to the goddess that they can't be as much help even if she considers them their messiah, because they're just humans. The goddess tells them they have power as no other humans have, and Touka suddenly feels a strange tingling sensation. She explains that the powers were bestowed upon them as she summoned them to her world, but Oyamata doesn't believe her, and he tells her to stop playing pranks on them. The goddess orders her guard to release a demon wolf on a prisoner, which it wastes no time devouring. She then takes out the wolf using a fireball spell, which surprises everyone. The students are now convinced that they're in an entirely different world than the one they're used to. The goddess asks them to approach a crystal ball individually so their skills can be revealed to them. Each student approaches the ball and their magic powers are appraised, but when Oyamata approaches the ball and places his hand on it, it gives off a bright red color, which surprises the mages. Oyamata is so impressed with his skills shown off by the crystal that he decides to accept his inevitable role as the messiah of the new world. Takuto walks up to the crystal ball to measure his magic abilities, but the crystal ball gets so overloaded that it breaks. The goddess praises him for being an S-rank hero and Oyamata runs over to her, wondering what rank he's in. She informs him that he is an A-rank hero, and he's disappointed that he couldn't outclass Takuto. Ayaka steps up to test her magic skills, and she also breaks the crystal ball, earning the S-rank. Hijiri follows suit, breaking the crystal and also earning the S-rank qualification. The goddess is amazed at the luck she had in just one summoning ritual, because getting an S-rank hero is very rare, but she managed to get 3 at once. Touka steps up to test his abilities, but the crystal ball only gives off a dull purple color, which makes the goddess conclude that he's insignificant. She ignores him and calls up the next person to detect their magic ability, and Touka walks away dejectedly because he's still treated like a background character, even in a different world. He decides to accept that as his reality because he won't be getting any special treatment. Yasu steps up to measure his magic, and the goddess is impressed because he's giving off the same aura as the Dark Hero, who is one of the strongest heroes in the past. The goddess shows the heroes how to check their stats, and Touka decides to look at his stats. He's disappointed in how average his stats are, but he notices that he has the inherent skill of abnormal state endowment. The goddess explains that the inherent skill is unique to each individual, but Oyamata is fed up with her yapping and he tells her to quit explaining. His teacher tries to put him in order, but Oyamata tells the teacher he has no right to talk to an A rank like that because he's just a D rank hero. The goddess informs them that they're about to perform an important ritual, and she calls Touka up, but he's not enthusiastic about it. The guards force him forward as the goddess explains that the lowest ranks in the past have a way of hindering the higher-ranking heroes. This heroes decided that such heroes should be disposed of, and since Touka was the lowest in that group, that was his fate. The goddess doesn't want to dispose of Touka in front of his classmates, so she decides to give him a chance to redeem himself. She tells him that he'll be sent to some ruins using the magic circle, and that if he manages to back up he will be given the free will to live peacefully in Alien. Touka wondered if he was being sent to a dangerous place, and the goddess tells him the place is very dangerous because criminals and corrupted heroes have been sent to the ruins in the past. He decides to tell her about his inherent skill, which is the abnormal state endowment skill, hoping it will help him out of his predicament. She informs him that all abnormal state skills and spells have no value in Alien because their effects and duration are too weak and short. She informs him that his unique skill is a disappointment because he can't even use it to take down low-level demons. Touka is dejected by this, but the goddess piles on the insults, telling him it would be a waste of time to level up because his stats are too low to ever become significantly high. Touka couldn't understand why he was being subjected to such a horrible fate when everything was done against his will, and he tried to protest against the goddess, but Takuto cut him off. Takuto tells him to accept his fate and get going so he doesn't keep everyone else waiting. Yasu goes over to Touka and extends out a helping hand. Touka remembers all they've been through in the past, and he's glad that Yasu is on his side, but Yasu tells him to address him with more respect because he's a higher-ranked hero. He walks away as the goddess announces the commencement of the ritual. The circle begins to glow and the goddess throws down a leather pocket, telling Touka that the pocket is his unique item. She tells him the orb on the pocket blows when infused with mana, which is all the pocket does. Ayaka suddenly protests the goddess's decision to send Touka to the ruins because he's their classmate. The goddess knocks her out while she tells everyone else to witness the fate of the only loser in their group. Touka is pissed by this and he decides to attack the goddess with a paralyzed spell, but it's dispelled by her magic bubble, which protects her against abnormal state spells. Touka's classmates make fun of him for being so powerless and he's so pissed off that they have such low impression of him. The Takao sisters walk away because they can't stand the humiliation that Touka is being put through. Touka had enough of the goddess and his classmates looking down on him. He channels that frustration and tells the goddess to be ready for his revenge if he ever makes it back alive. As the ritual is completed and he disappears, he tries to check his stats but the window refuses to come up because of lack of visibility. He locates his pocket in the darkness and he pours mana into it, making it. He begins to make his way across the ruins when he stumbles upon some skeletal remains. Touka is now scared of the monsters that could be residing in the ruins. He suddenly dodges as a minotaur monster attacks him from behind. Touka decides to run away from the monster as fast as possible, trusting his instincts to lead him through because he can feel the murderous intent of the monsters. Touka suddenly trips on a stone and falls to the ground, surrendering to his fate as a meal for the monster. He then remembers how his classmates look down on him, and he realizes that he wants power so he can teach them all a lesson. He uses his paralyzed skill on the monster but he's surprised it worked. He decides to keep running, wondering why his spell worked, when the goddess said it would be useless against low-level demons. Touka sums up his encounter as a miracle but he comes up on a bird demon and he could feel its intent to take him down. He uses his paralyzed skill again and he's surprised that it worked. He reasons that his abnormal state skills are different from the other state skills known in Alien. He realizes that he doesn't have much mana left so he uses his poison skill on the demon bird. He's worried about what will happen if he keeps using his skills and drains his mana completely. He decides to rest for a minute but the Minotaur appears again because his paralyzed skill has worn off. Touka wonders if someone will come to his rescue but he remembers that no one ever comes to his aid. He decides to keep laying waste to the monsters so that he can stay alive for as long as possible. He's ready to begin the struggle for survival in the ruins as he makes up his mind to live. The story continues. We see Touka attempts to use Paralyzed on the Minotaur again but this time the skill fails to activate, so Touka has to jump out of the way. He's informed by the system that he is not allowed to cast the same effect multiple times on a single target, so it becomes up with a new plan and casts Sleep on the Minotaur, causing it to fall to the ground unconscious. And once the monster is out cold, Touka applies poison to it as well. It looks like there are no restrictions on stacking effects, but he's out of mana so if he keeps using his skills, he will eventually burn through his stamina as well, and are still a lot more monsters for him to deal with. Touka begins spamming paralysis and eventually he has managed to stop all the monsters, but has left him on the verge of collapse. However, his troubles aren't over yet, as even more monsters begin to approach, so he has no choice but to keep using Paralyzed until his body can't take it anymore, and it's not long before he reaches his limit and can't go on. There are still a lot of monsters around him, but he knows if he tries to use his still even one more time it could mean the end of him. He has no other options available but luckily, just he's about to use up the last of his body's stamina, the cockatrice that he pours in a while ago suddenly eyes and due to this memory's level shoots up until he's at level 258 and both his mana and stamina are replenished. Touka doesn't understand what happened at first, but then he notices the dead monster and realizes that he must have gotten experience because his poison killed that one, and with his energy replenished he can keep fighting as much as necessary. As he continues to spam paralysis his skill levels up, leading him to believe he can upgrade it by repeated use, but he will worry about that later since for now, he has to make sure he can escape this place alive. With his paralysis now being level 2 Touka notices that he now has the option to select multiple targets at once, so he does so and the monsters are all immediately frozen in place. So far, the status effects of have 100% success rate so Vicious is probably the only person in this world that his skill has no effect on. He begins inflicting poison on all the paralyzed monsters and eventually his poison skill levels up as well, but there are still a lot more monsters here, so that means he can level up even more. Touka takes a look at his status window and since he leveled up, his stats are far higher than they were when he first got here, especially his mana which is now over 8,000 and mana is his only way of surviving this hellhole. Touka takes a break and sits down while he waits for the poison to do its thing, and eventually the monsters begin dying one by one, raising Memory's level even further. By the time he's level 500, Touka is fairly confident that he can now make it out of the ruins, so be prepared to take care of the remaining monsters. However, after seeing Touka kill dozens of them with ease, the monsters have enough common sense to know that they shouldn't mess with him, so they all run off. Now that the area is safe, Touka sifts through the piles of rotting bones in order to find any loot that he could use, and after getting his hands on a cloak and a blade, he sets off to escape the ruins. As he looks for the exit, he comes across many different monsters, but he has realized that he faces another problem. He has no food, so he's going to start soon if he doesn't get something to eat. He's so desperate that he's even willing to eat monster meat, so after retracing his steps, he returns to the monster corpses and reluctantly begins carving into them to eat what he can. However, as the eyeball pops out and Touka tries to eat it, he realizes that the monster's entire body has acid in it, so he won't be able to eat it after all. With no source of food, Touka believes he will starve to death or he ever makes it out of here. He has no energy left in his body, but then he notices the color of his magic bag changing, and since that's the only source of light he has, he frantically rushes over to supply it with more mana. However, as he does so, he feels something appear inside the bag, and to his delight he finds a bag of beef jerky and a bottle of soda. He excitedly begins eating. While this means his hunger problem is solved for now, he doesn't know for sure if he will be able to get the bag-produced food again. As days continue to pass inside the ruins, Touka has gotten used to committing mass monster genocide with his skills, but he is worried that he might be losing his humanity because of this. Back on Earth, after suffering abuse at the hands of his stepfather, Touka was on the verge of having his murderous villain arc right then and there, but before he could lose his sense of humanity, he was rescued by his aunt and uncle who took him in and gave him a sense of normalcy. He learned empathy from them and he thought he had become a normal person like them. Right now, as he is staring at the mountain of corpses beneath his feet, he feels nothing at all. There's no going back to how he was before, so Touka just accepts that he's a psychopath now and moves on. As he goes, he comes across another action of the ruins with the floating eyeball monster, but Touka just takes it out with his poison. As he moves forward, he comes across a door with a magic lock, and upon opening it he finds a small room with two skeletons inside. He assumed they must have been people that were disposed of by Vicious as well, but they weren't fortunate enough to make it out alive. He searches through the things and finds a pouch full of gems, so while he feels bad about stealing from the dead, the gems could be valuable and he could use them once he gets out of here, so he no longer feels bad about it. He goes through the other rooms nearby as well and eventually comes across one that takes a large amount of mana to open. Once he finally unlocks it, he finds a skeleton sitting with a note next to it. The note says that the skeleton was once a man known as Anglin the Great Sage, and he was the former hero of darkness. The same one Vicious had mentioned was the strongest of them all. According to Anglin's note, Vicious sent him here by force after she no longer has a need for him as a hero, and while he was powerful enough to make it this far, he clearly couldn't escape, so he left a message to help the next person who could manage to make it this far. Vicious may have said the Demon Lord was evil, but she's just as bad in Touka's eye, although we can't say he is much better than her either, since his only goal is to get revenge on her and he doesn't care if he has to destroy the world to do it. As he's looting Anglin's corpse, he comes across a book of forbidden arts, and it is full of information about recipes for medicine and magic tool instructions that could prove to be useful later, so he decides to keep it. He also finds a scroll of forbidden magic, but he doesn't understand what it says. However, if a great sage like Anglin went through all the trouble of keeping it hidden with him up until his final moments, then it must be really powerful, and it may even be strong enough for Touka to eventually defeat the goddess if he's ever able to decipher it. Touka is just about ready to leave, but before he goes, he steals Anglin's cloak because it's cooler than his old one, and takes a look at Anglin's book again, but this time he sees a bloody warning telling him to beware of the Soul Eater, and the ominous warning has me wondering if the Soul Eater is the one who killed Anglin. Touka continues making his way through the ruins until he comes across a door that he thinks will lead to the surface. However, this is truly the final door, then that must mean the Soul Eater Anglin was talking about this here as well. Touka remains cautious of his surroundings and takes a look at his stats to make sure he is prepared for this. He did all he could to ensure he leveled up as much as possible before he got here, so we can only hope that his skills are enough to defeat it. Touka eventually finds a creepy face and he is certain that this must be the Soul Eater, so he immediately attempted to use Paralyze on it, but the second he steps out of cover, the Soul Eater fires a laser into his hand. This is the first time anything has managed to stop him from using his skill, and Touka has to kill it, since the only way out is to use the gem on his forehead. To activate his skill, he needs to say it out loud and be within a certain distance, but none of that matters if the Soul Eater can attack him before he finishes casting the spell. While Touka is still thinking about what to do, the Soul Eater breaks out of the wall to go after him, so he really has no choice but to fight now. Meanwhile, outside the ruins, a girl is trying to escape from her pursuers and decides to hide nearby, not knowing their fierce battle is taking place inside. As the Soul Eater slowly approaches Touka, he wonders why it hasn't fired its lasers at him yet, but he soon finds out why as the Soul Eater spits up some purple gum which takes the form of humans. These are the souls of the people the Soul Eater has killed, and they are being forced to attack Touka, so if he's forced to paralyze them. However, he can't bring himself to use poison because they are still human, even if they become gross globs of paste. The Soul Eater enjoys watching as Touka struggles because he can't attack the souls for moral reasons, and he can't attack the Soul Eater either because it would react too fast. Touka begins breaking down and crying a lot because he says he doesn't want to hurt other people, and he's losing aura by the minute with his constant crying, but as the Soul Eater is reveling in Touka's tears, he reveals that it was all an act as he paralyzes the Soul Eater. He knew he could never land a successful paralyze on the Soul Eater unless he managed to get it to lower its guard, so if he pretended to be in the middle of a mental crisis just so the Soul Eater wouldn't suspect anything, and now that the Soul Eater is paralyzed, Touka doesn't really care what happens to the souls if he kills the Soul Eater, and even though he spent so much time trying to become a harmless law-abiding citizen, all he cares about are facts. Those soul puppets were trying to kill him so they could be babies. All he cares, he's still going to poison them anyway. The Soul Eater struggles to move out of frustration that it lost to Touka, and this lets Touka know that powerful monsters can try to overcome his paralysis, but it does additional damage to their bodies. That's interesting at all, but he doesn't want to waste any more time here. So he casts poison on the Soul Eater and destroys it once and for all. Upon doing so, the souls that the Soul Eater consumed are released, and they all appear in front of Touka to thank him for freeing them. They've been rooting for him as he tried to survive the ruins, and none of them really mind the fact that he looted their bodies either. Touka is then approached by Anglin, and he has only one thing to say. He wants Touka to take down the goddess and avenge them all. The souls of the dead pass on after that, and while Touka normally wouldn't accept a request without some sort of compensation, he was already planning on taking her down anyway, and now that the final monster has been defeated, Touka can open the door and begin his quest for revenge on the surface. Meanwhile, Touka's classmates are all busy hunting to level up, and while Oyamata is busy chasing down a wolf, Takuto easily annihilates the monster with his Dragonic Burst, putting him at level 18, and Yasu is just having a blast with his powers over here. Meanwhile, on the other side of the forest, this girl is having a hard time coming to terms with the situation, but all of a sudden she's approached by Asagi, who warns Kabato that she can't be spacing out like that, otherwise she'll end up getting herself killed. The reason she came over is because she wanted to discuss something with her, so she begins talking about how sooner or later the class is going to split defections. There are a lot of powerful douchebag in the class, including her, so there's no way they'll keep getting along much longer. That's why when the class eventually divides, she was Kabato to join her faction. Besides, it's not like that Kabato has many other options considering she's deranked. There's no way she'll be accepted into Takuto's S-ranked group while being deranked. The Takao sisters only ever team up with each other, and Ayaka probably going to end up dead before long. Kabato was shocked to hear that, but Asagi continues by saying Kabato needs to think long and hard about her future since she may end up with nowhere to go, and while Asagi probably won't need her help much since she's beranked, she happens to be an OP enthusiast, and she's particularly fond of Kabato for that reason. Now that Kabato was on board with joining the group, Asagi calls for the other girls to bring over the monster they captured. She knows Kabato hasn't been able to complete the assignment that Goddess gave them, so she prepared things to make it easier for her. Now all she needs to do is kill the defenseless monster, and Asagi urges her to do it unless she wants to end up getting disposed of like Touka. Kabato doesn't want to do it, but she knows she has no choice, so she sucks at her morals and slays the monster. Asagi praises Kabato for doing a good job and says she's officially part of the group, but Kabato is still struggling to accept what she just did. Elsewhere, Ayaka was woken up from her coma, and the pain in her stomach reminds her of what must have happened to Touka after the goddess got punched her, and she feels really guilty for not being able to stop it, so she goes on to complain to Vicious, and Vicious is really trying to play the part of the caring goddess with all the fake tears. But she says the disposal of the weak is the policy of the alien kingdom, so there's nothing she can do about it. Vicious also informs Ayaka that she doesn't have much time to wallow in sadness over it either, since while she was knocked out, her classmates headed out to the forest to see if they were able to kill monsters or not, and many of them ended up failing the requirements of the test, thus were disposed of. Ayaka asks Vicious intends to kill off any heroes who she deems to be weak, but Vicious claims is aliens' policy, so it's not her fault, even though she's a literal goddess. So Vicious say how things are going, so she wants to make it clear to Vicious that she doesn't approve how things are being handled. Vicious doesn't see what the problem is, since it's common sense that all the worthless people should be disposed of, so Ayaka asks Vicious if she is a valuable hero since she is S-class. Vicious answers that Ayaka is indeed very valuable, so Ayaka proposes a deal. She will go above and beyond as an S-rank hero to make up for the weaknesses of the people who failed, so she asks that Vicious stop the disposal plan. Vicious says she can agree to those terms, so she extends her hand to make it official. She also wants to apologize for punching Ayaka in the stomach, but she still thinks she was justified in doing so since Ayaka was acting hysterical over the situation. Ayaka clearly isn't fooled by Vicious and nice act, but she's got no other choice at the moment, so she agrees to shake her hand, but as she leaves, she notes that Vicious' hands were ice cold just like her heart probably. Meanwhile, in the dark forest, a girl's trying to escape her pursuers and she had thought she lost them. They are way too good at tracking, based on nothing more than a broken leaf. Megat's Bladens is able to tell exactly where the Princess Knight ran off to. She may be able to conceal herself, but if she keeps making working mistakes like these, the Holy Watchers be sure to catch up to her sooner or later. At the same time, Touka is just about to head out into the forest in hopes of finding a city, but before he does, he checks his stats one last time and notes that only his mana is exceptionally high at 50,000, while the rest of his stats hover around 5k. But he already knew that, so he really wants to confirm as the new abilities he got with his skills leveling up, he is now able to dispel paralyze and poison and will or partially dispel it just to avoid killing his target immediately. That's going to be pretty useful when it comes to extracting information, so he decides to test it out on the next monster he encounters. For now, he's going to need a blade, or more specifically, someone who could act as a tank and handle the front lines for him. Just then, he hears some rustling in the bushes, so he goes over to check it out and finds a bunch of slimes ending up on a single smaller slime, and he decides to stand there and watch as the smaller slime goes through his bullying character arc. Once the small slime learns to fight back, Touka is satisfied, so he paralyzes them all and uses the opportunity to test out the dispel option. He dispels the paralysis on the bully slimes first to get them to leave, and once they are gone, he tells the smaller slime that it doesn't need to worry since he has no intention of killing it. He's about to let it go as well, but before that he wants to apologize for not helping sooner. Enjoyed seeing the little guy stand up for himself, so he tells the slime that it did well, and after releasing it he heads off on his way. The slime doesn't really know what to do now since it doesn't have any slime friends to go back to, so decides to follow Touka instead. Touka eventually notices that he's being followed, but he doesn't mind since he could use the company. Meanwhile, the Princess Knight is currently exhausted from all the running she's had to do, but here with the distance she has covered, she can still sense the presence of the Holy Watchers nearby, so they must just be waiting for the tire out so they can capture her. Touka and the slime that bonded a little, so slime is now sitting in the back of Touka's jacket to keep watch while he takes a look at the spell book. After flipping through some pages, Touka finds the full bitten art he was looking for, and it's one that's meant to strengthen monsters. There are even instructions on how to strengthen slimes in particular, so this will come in handy for Touka, but he understands why it's classified as a forbidden art since these could cause a lot of chaos in the wrong hands. Before he does anything else, Touka talks to the slime and tells it that he is on a quest for revenge, so if the slime isn't okay with that, this is his last chance to back out. The slime sign says he wants to stick by Touka's side, so Touka names at Pigamaru and prepares to continue with his journey. The fleeing Princess Knight can sense that the Holy Watchers are closing in on her, so while she hoped she wouldn't have to use it, she's forced to activate her spirit contract. She offers up her sleepless payment and even does the old Power Rangers transformation routine, but as the Holy Watchers finally catch up, they are shocked to find out that they've been tracking the wrong person since Touka definitely isn't their target. Now they could have just ignored Touka since he has nothing to do with their mission, but they're too scummy to do something like that, so one tells Touka to drop all his valuables so they don't have to kill him, but the other guy says he's still going to kill Touka anyway because it'll be fun. They also talked about doing terrible things to his corpse, so Touka has already decided that these guys have got to go and watch them real quick, while the scumbags aren't paying attention. Touka starts shuffling away slowly, and while the group notices and think he was trying to escape, Touka was actually just trying to get them all within his field of vision. Touka plays the part of his scared weakling well, but as Megat's attempts to slice him up, he wastes no time in paralyzing him along with all his teammates. Since it was successful, Touka now knows that his status effects work on humans as well, so Vicious is probably the only person who's immune to them. Back to the Holy Watchers, these guys weren't as intimidating as the monsters he had to fight in the ruins, but their malicious intent was far worse, so Touka has no issue with killing them since they tried to kill him first. He casts his poison, and after all the Holy Watchers are dead, Touka spends some time looting their corpses, but then both he and Pigamaru sense some nearby. Meanwhile, the Princess Knight has been standing in battle position for a while now, and she just noticed that she can no longer feel the presence of the Holy Watchers in the forest, but she thinks it must be some kind of trap to get her to lower her guard. However, just then she senses someone else in the forest and it's freaking her out. This guy's presence isn't immensely powerful, but for some reason, the spirits are scared of him. Just then she hears something behind her, so she attacks. However, it turns out to be Pigamaru, who is acting as a distraction from Touka, and with the girl's back turned, Touka paralyzes her. She sensed her intent to attack, but it wasn't out of malice, so Touka grew curious and thought they could chat for a bit. Although he doesn't let her move as a precaution, she asks him what he wants from her, so Touka explains that he's not from around here and needs help learning about the area, so he was hoping she could make herself useful. Before that, she asked about the other 4 guys that were in the forest, so Touka tells her that he killed them. The girl was shocked, so Touka asks if it's a problem that he killed them, but she says she is just surprised that Touka was able to defeat the Holy Watchers on his own. She can sense that Touka isn't lying to her, probably thinning stone of her abilities, so she agrees to answer any questions Touka and may have for her in return for saving her life from the Holy Watchers. Touka can tell that this girl isn't a bad person, so he trusts her a little more now, but there are still some things that he would rather keep to himself though, and the same goes for the girl, so they both agree not to pry into each other's personal matters. As the timer for paralysis counts down, Touka asks a lot of questions and learns that this place isn't even alien. He's currently in a place called the Kingdom of Ulza, so the goddess disposed of him and someone else's kingdom. Touka still has one last question for the girl, so he pulls out a page from the Forbidden Arts book and asks the girl if she understands it. The girl is able to recognize that it is some sort of ancient script, but that was as much as she could say since she wasn't able to read it either. However, she says she may know someone who can understand that writing, so she tells Mimori about the Witch of Taboos. She possesses such vast knowledge of forbidden techniques that she was deemed too dangerous and was driven from her homeland. Touka asks where he should go if she wants to find her, so the girl instructs him to go to the land of the golden-eyed monsters, but it's a treacherous part of the continent. Touka thanks her for the valuable information, but the girl doesn't feel like she has done enough to repay her debts since Touka saved her life. Touka says she doesn't have to worry about doing any more than this, so they'll be parting ways now. The girl is fine with it as long as Touka is satisfied, and Touka and can tell that she has a strong sense of honor and honesty, which reminds him a lot of his aunt, who was so nice that it often made him worry about her. He tells her that the paralysis will be undone in a few minutes, but he can't guarantee her safety since he will be leaving now. As Touka leaves, he says he hopes the girl makes it to her destination safely, and as Pigamaru returns, he asks if Touka isn't going to kill her. Touka says he wouldn't do that since he doesn't find any joy in killing, he just does it for self-defense, so there's no reason to pointlessly murder the girl. Although he can't guarantee that the girl will come after him to attack once she's free to move again, so he asked Pigamaru to keep watching his back for him. Touka soon makes it to the town, and he is stopped at the front gate by a guard who is in charge of performing security checks. She assumes Touka must be a traveling mercenary who came here to conquer the mill's ruins. Touka plays along with the story and says he indeed came here to conquer the ruins, also adding that he comes from Ulza town, so he doesn't know much about this place. His story seems convincing enough for the guard, so she lets him in since she has orders to allow as many mercenaries as possible into the towns. Touka is surprised by the relaxed security since there were no luggage checks or full cavity body searches, but it works out well for him since his plans are going smoothly. The first thing he does is head to an inn to get himself a room, but while he's at the front desk, innkeeper is being pretty rude to him since he thinks Touka is a broke loser. However, little does he know Touka eluded a bunch of money off the corpses of the Holy Watchers, and as soon as he flashes a bit of cash, the innkeeper starts treating him a whole lot nicer. Touka gets to stay in a room like he wanted, and now that his accommodations have been secured, he goes out into town for a bit to survey the area, and even though he's an outsider, he doesn't feel any hostility directed towards him. So he takes a leisurely stroll and comes across places like item shops and the town's adventurers guild. This information may come in handy later, but for now, Touka has gotten hungry, so he turns around and heads to a nearby tavern to grab some food. He tries the food of this world for the first time and it doesn't taste great, but it's edible enough that Touka is okay eating it. He thinks this tavern is great because the people here are happy and drunk, and thus makes it easy to gather information since everyone is talking so loudly. He's able to overhear some guys talking about how the continent is full of insanely strong people, so they having a power scaling debate about who they think is the strongest. But in the end they know that there's only one team that can hold the title of strongest, and that's the Black Dragon Knights who destroyed the Kingdom of Ni. Their 5 dragons alone are enough to completely wipe out an army, but on top of that, they got humanity's strongest and the hero's slayer, so it's a safe bet to say they would win any direct confrontation. After Touka has gathered a good amount of intel for the night, he takes some leftover rice back to his room so he can feed Pigamaru, and while Pigamaru is eating, he goes over his plans for the future. For now, his top priority is finding someone who knows how to read the language in the scroll of forbidden magic, and the only person who would be able to do that is the Witch of Taboos. Another priority of his is to make the monster strengthening solution so he can improve the abilities of Pigamaru. But now that he's thinking about it, the nobleman of this town has been gathering mercenaries to conquer the mill's ruins, and one of the ingredients needed for the strengthening solution are the bones of the skeleton soldier, and skeleton soldiers just so happen to be found in the mill's dungeon, so Touka makes plans to head there tomorrow. The next day, all the mercenaries in town gather towards the Marquis Cred Hercley has to say. Cred tells them that a new floor within the ruins has been uncovered, so he is tasting them all with exploring set floor, and as a reward he promises that whosoever manages to acquire the Dragon Eye Chalice that is within the ruins will receive a prize of 300 gold pieces. Is also willing to pay good price for any other treasures that are brought back, and the mercenaries are free to use whatever monster parts they find as they see fit. Touka is glad because that means he will be allowed to keep the skeleton bones from the ruins once he acquires them. Now that everyone is clear on the terms, they all line up to begin registration, but while Touka is waiting in line, he never sees a commotion going on at the other end of the line. There's this random guy constantly yapping about how one girl in line is really pretty. In fact, she's so pretty that he could swear if she was a princess, or maybe even a princess knight of the destroyed kingdom of Ni, and who wasn't bounty on her head perhaps. We see what happened was that a couple years back this guy tried asking the princess knight out on date, but she said no, and from that day onwards, he had burned her face, voice, and chest into his Touka so he could get his revenge someday, and she went to great lengths to ensure her face was covered, so the man has to have some degenerate skill if he was able to recognize her just from her opie. Anyway, to prove that he is right about her identity, he reaches over to pull off her cloak and show the crowd her face, but as he does so, he is shocked to find out that the girl's face isn't the same as that of Princess Sarah's Ashrain, and the girl now states that her name is Miss Belucas. He never misidentifies Opie, so he knows that she must be Ashrain, but he has no way of proving it, so he swears to get his revenge on Mist as well as every beautiful woman that has made him look like a fool. A little while later, Touka is planning on going shopping for some supplies to use during the mission, but as he is walking, the girl approaches him to ask if he's here to explore the dungeon as well. Touka recognizes her and feels sympathetic that she has to deal with so many people trying to reveal her identity, but she says it's not that much of a problem since she disguised her face ahead of time. Still, Touka suggests she be careful about guys like that, because even if he doesn't know her real identity for now, he seems like he's petty enough to try attacking her, just because she made him look like a fool in front of everyone. But that said, Touka tells her that he has a request he would like to make, so he explains that he has no idea about the value of the items in this town, so he would like her to help him negotiate so that he doesn't get swindled. And of course, he isn't asking her to do this for free, as he promises to compensate her for her assistance if she accepts. She decides to accept his offer since she's pretty much broke right now, so that two shake hands and she introduces herself to him as her alias, Mist, while Touka introduces himself under the name Hattie. The two of them proceed to go shopping together, and since Mist went and negotiated for him, she ultimately saves Touka's around 3 silver coins worth and deals, so he gives that to her as her compensation. She's surprised to receive this much money just for shopping with him, but Touka believes is a fair reward for the help she offered him, so she accepts the payment and is about to leave, but as she attempts to walk away, she ends up collapsing to the ground. Touka asked her if she is alright and she says she's okay, but she hasn't been able to sleep well for the past few days, so she's a little tired. She then turns and leaves, so Touka leaves things as they are and decides to head to the ruins to begin hunting for skeletons. Within the ruins, as Touka descending the stairs, he hears some mercenaries scream as they run past him that there's a little ox demon down there, so Touka assumes it must be a miniature version of the minotaurs that he had to fight in the ruins of Disposal. The ox demon charges towards him, but Touka quickly paralyzes and poisons it, so it wasn't much of a threat to him, and he stabs the ox demon to test whether the demon's skin is as tough as the ones in the abandoned ruins, but this one is much easier to stab. A little while later, those mercenaries that ran away earlier return with backup to defeat the ox demon, and when they find it dead, they are shocked that someone was actually capable of killing a monster like this so quickly. Touka heads deeper into the ruins, but despite the place crawling with monsters, he isn't feeling very threatened by any of them since they are easy to kill. He isn't getting much experience from killing the monsters either, so he decides to head a little deeper into the ruins to find some strong monster. While walking through the halls, he happens to overhear that loser from earlier talking to a couple of mercenaries, and he's asking them to go after Mist and make her regret ever being born, all because she didn't want to go on a date with him and made him look like he was wrong about her identity. So he can't let her continue to live in this world, and preferably, he wants the mercenaries make her suffer as much as possible before killing her so he can see the twisted look of despair on her. At first, the mercenaries thought it was messed up to go this far just because someone ignored him, but money is money, so they agreed to do it and start talking about how they will torture her. Touka overhears all of this, and since he is sure these guys are irredeemable scumbags at this point, and he's not about to let them get away with their plans to kill Mist, so he steps out to confront them. As soon as they see him, they all threaten to kill Touka, but Touka just raises his hand and paralyzes them all. He then inflicts poison on them, and it feels oddly satisfying to eliminate scumbags when he gets the chance. After the scumbags are dead, Touka continues his venture into the ruins, but before he heads to the next level, he decides to take a little break. 3 hours later, Touka wakes up from his nap and thanks Pigamaru for being a lookout in case any monster showed up. He exits the room to head to the next floor, but before he can do that, he runs into a team of mercenaries and they tell them to be careful since there's a lot of strange stuff happening in these ruins. People have been coming across a lot of monster corpses, but it's not clear what killed the monsters since there are no clear signs of attack. It pretty much looks like the monsters fell over dead in the middle of the ruins. As the leader of the Saber Tigers party, Lily Adamantine values the lives of her teammates more than anything else, so while she would normally continue with the ruins exploration, she has made the decision to back out and head back to the surface. She even offers to let Touka come with her, but Touka says she wants to continue with the ruins exploration, so Lily and the rest of her team wishes him good luck with that. Touka knows all the unexplained deaths are because of him, but it works out well in his favor since if people believe there's something strange going on in the ruins, that means fewer mercenaries will show up in the ruins. Touka heads down deeper until he finally arrives at the room where the Dragonite Chalice is located, and there's a giant gargoyle statue right beside it, but it's totally harmless, so there's no need to worry about it. Yet, Touka isn't stupid, so he casts Paralyzed and Poison on the statue, and sure enough, it turns out to be a monster and it soon ends up dying. Touka has now officially obtained the Dragon Chalice, and soon after he acquires it, Mist shows up and is disappointed that she didn't manage to get here first. Touka doesn't really care about the chalice, so he says Mist can have it if she wants. She can't believe Touka would give her something worth 300 gold coins, so she asks what she wants in return, but Touka honestly doesn't need anything from her. Mist said she can't accept something so valuable for free, but Touka says she should just hurry up and take it, and she should probably get some proper sleep soon, otherwise she will end up collapsing. She still doesn't feel right accepting this, so Touka tells her that he never cared about the cup in the first place. What he's really after is located further down in the ruins, so Mist offers to act as his guard while he's down there. Right now, the only thing she can think to offer him is her skill with her sword, and she promises not to be hindrance, so Touka agrees under few conditions. The first condition is that neither of them asks too many questions about each other's personal lives, and he won't necessarily be returning to the surface within a day, so if Mist wants to return by herself, Touka won't be responsible for her safety. Mist agrees to the terms, so they head down to the next floor, and Mist shows Touka just how useful she can be as she cuts down a giant flower monsters. Touka is impressed, but there's something he would like to ask her about. He has noticed that some monsters have golden eyes while others don't, so he was wondering what the difference is between them. Mist explains that monsters with golden eyes are said to contain experience, so they are the perfect prey for monsters, the heroes of another world, to level up. She has no idea that Touka is one of said heroes, so she was on to explain that heroes gain no experience from killing humans, so experience for them is something that is unique to monsters, and in regards to monsters without golden eyes, they are just regular monsters and can even form friendly relationships with humans under the right circumstances. According to legends, the Demon King radiates a powerful energy known as Demon Essence, and monsters which are affected by this essence become incredibly violent and how their eyes turn gold. Before they go any further, Touka suggests they take a break so Mist can get some sleep, but she says she doesn't need any sleep since she's meant to be guarding Touka, but he eventually convinces her to lie down, and once she does, he casts sleep on her so she can get some proper rest. Meanwhile, the Black Dragon Knights have just come across the site where the Holy Watchers were killed, and their leader, Civic Gartland, is excited to face the person who's strong enough to take out the Holy Watchers so easily. After a few hours, Touka's sleep effect wears off, so Mist's disguise returns as she wakes up, as she has no idea how she fell asleep since her pact should still be in effect. She looks around for Touka and to her relief, it looks like he was sleeping the entire time so he couldn't have seen her true identity. However, Touka is just pretending to sleep so she doesn't become paranoid, and once he pretends to wake up they continue their journey further into the dungeon. They soon arrive at another room, and while it looks like it's empty, Touka hears an unsettling sound, so he warns Mist back away from the door and moments later, a Skeleton King emerges. Touka can tell if the Skeleton King is much stronger than any other monster they faced till now, but Mist believes they should be able to slay if they target the silver part on its chin. That's a pretty obvious weak spot, but the Skeleton King is still a formidable monster. It is so strong that it would take all the members of the Saber Tiger Party to defeat it. The Skeleton King seems to think Mist is the biggest threat here, so she's likely going to get targeted first. She needs to get ready to defend herself, so she tells Touka that she's about to use her trump card, but she would like it to remain a secret for as long as possible, so she asked him to keep it between them. Mist also apologizes in advance because if the monster exceeds her expectations and she may not be able to defend Touka as she promised earlier. Touka agrees that the Skeleton King is strong and fighting it would probably be rather troublesome, so he decides to use his ability and paralyze the monster. Mist is shocked on the monster freezes in place, and even more so when Touka poisons it and defeats the monster in world record time. Now that it has been defeated, Touka begins collecting the bones from the Skeleton King and confirms that these are the ones the recipe requires. He says they can head back to the surface now, but he can tell that Mist has dozens of questions to ask him, so he says he will give her some answers as long as the questions are too invasive. Just then, Pigamaru gets Touka's attention and tells him that there's something interesting over by the skeleton, so Touka goes to take a look and he indeed finds something interesting. It's a magic cloth with an egg wrapped inside it, and while he has no idea what to do with it, he decides to take it with him regardless. Meanwhile, Touka's classmates are all running away in fear after encountering a group of skeleton soldiers, and this girl in particular is freaking out on the floor over her dismembered hand, but there are still skeletons approaching to dismember more than her hand, so Ayaka is trying to step up and defend her weaker classmates, but Oyamata doesn't give a shit about his classmates and runs and blasting the skeletons. Same as Takuto, although he nearly kills his classmates as well, but why would he care about them? He just hit level 24, so he is too busy patting himself on the back for a job well done. Meanwhile, Touka and Mist have made it back to the surface and Mist presents the dragon chalice so she can receive her reward, and while the crowd surrounds her to get a look at the chalice, Touka quietly walks away since he's gotten everything he needs from the mill's ruins. After a while, Mist catches up to Touka and tells him that an award ceremony is going to be held tomorrow where she will be awarded her prize money, so she's still going to need to stay in town till then. Since she's not busy for the rest of the day, Touka asks if he can have a chat with her in private. He asks if they can meet up in his room later tonight and Mist is fine with that, so Touka turns to leave, but before he goes she grabs Touka by the arm and thanks him once again for giving her the dragon chalice. Later that night, Pigamaru is eating his dinner while Touka prepares the monster strengthening solution, and just as he finishes making it, Mist arrives at his door. Touka lets her inside and he gets right to the point as he tells Mist that he wants to hire her as his bodyguard. Mist is rather surprised by the proposal, but Touka thought it would be a win-win since she would get extra travel funds, but then again, if she receives the 300 gold coins then she probably won't need to worry about money for a while. In any case, he pulls out a map and tells Mist that his goal is to reach the Witch of Taboos and the land of the golden-eyed monsters. He is expecting to get swarmed by a large number of monsters on his journey at least once, so he would feel a lot better if he had a capable warrior there to watch his back for him. And after working with her in the mill's ruin, he believes Mist would be the perfect bodyguard for him. Mist happens to be on her way to Yamato, which means she could accompany Touka quite conveniently, but she is still hesitant to accept the offer for some reason. Touka notices this and tells her that there's no rush to answer right away, besides he had something he wanted to discuss with Sarah's first anyway. It takes her a moment to realize that Touka just called her by her real name. And once she does, she asks me more how he knew about her real identity. Touka reveals that he was the one who put her to sleep back in the dungeon and as such, he saw her real face. It's clear that she was hesitating to accept his offer because she was worried about how difficult it would be to keep her identity secret from him while traveling together. Which is probably the reason she refused to sleep while working with Touka earlier. He assures her that he has no intention of selling her out for any reason, so she doesn't have to worry about him betraying her. Ceres reveals that she uses the power of spirits to conceal her identity, but in exchange, she has to forego her desire to sleep. That's why she returns to normal when she goes to sleep, and it's also the reason why the Holy Watchers were chasing her back in the forest, since they managed to spot her while she was asleep and didn't have her disguise. She begins to undo her disguise as she tells Touka that she's grateful for him killing the Holy Watchers, since she has a lot less to worry about now. Touka asks if the fact that she removed her disguise around him means that she trusts him now, and Ceres confirms that she believes he's a trustworthy person. She officially agrees to act as Touka's bodyguard, and the two shake hands to mark their new partnership. Touka reaches into his bag and pulls out a blue gem to give to Ceres as her payment, but Ceres is stunned as he hands it to her because this thing is an authentic blue dragon gem. Touka doesn't know what the big deal is since it's just one of the gems he looted in the abandoned ruins, so Ceres explains that gems like this are incredibly rare and are even worth way more than the dragon chalice. Touka doesn't really care that the gem is valuable, so he tells Ceres she could still keep the gem anyway. Ceres doesn't want to accept it because it is worth way too much, but Touka has a whole bag full of them, so he insists that she keep the gem. Ceres finally relents and agrees to accept the gem as payment, but before they go their separate ways for today, Touka says they should still call each other by their aliases to protect their identities when they are out in public. Ceres agrees to this, and since they will be working together for a while, she thinks she should inform Touka of the reason why she's on the run. However, Touka tells her he doesn't need to know that he has no interest in prying into her past unnecessarily, nor does he want her to feel pressured into telling him anything. The next day, Touka and Ceres are having breakfast together, and Touka takes the opportunity to ask her if she happens to know anything about forbidden magic. Ceres tells him that it is magic that has been prohibited by Vicious, but they are generally understood to be specific ancient spells. The only reason the spells are forbidden is because Vicious said so, and the people don't like questioning her. If Vicious went through the trouble to personally outlaw the forbidden spells, then it is very likely that she did so because the spells could be dangerous to her. Unfortunately, Ceres doesn't have any more information on the forbidden spells, but Touka says she's giving him a good amount of info, so he's thankful. After breakfast, Ceres says she needs to go to the awards ceremony so she can get her prize, so she will meet back up with me more in the afternoon, and after going their separate ways, Touka decides to head into the forest and test out that monster strengthening potion he made. Meanwhile, at the reception for Ceres, an illusionist was hired to make sure the dragon chalice was the real thing, and this wouldn't be an issue normally, but Ceres has a bad feeling about this since she's using illusion magic to hide her identity. Hours go by and Ceres still hasn't returned like she had said she would, so Touka is starting to get rather worried. Meanwhile, Vicious is having a meeting with Ayaka over the recent ruin expedition to the ruins that the class took, and Ayaka asks if Vicious can take care of Sakura since she got her hand cut off. Vicious agrees to heal the girl, but she makes it clear that she's only doing it because Sakura is B rank, otherwise if she were something like D rank, then health insurance wouldn't be available for her. By the way, Vicious asks Ayaka if she is considered join Takuto team, but Ayaka can't imagine herself getting along with Takuto when he cares so little about the lives around him. Vicious calls Ayaka's decision selfish, so Ayaka starts trying to explain herself, but Vicious tells her she's obligated to justify herself. Although she wants to know if Ayaka is still committed to saving this world since she isn't putting in as much effort as an S-rank adventurer should. Ayaka asserts that she's fulfilling her duties as an S-rank in her own way, so Vicious agrees to let her do as she pleases, but she also says that Ayaka will be tasked with taking care of those who couldn't pass the trials. Vicious ones are train them, but Ayaka against the idea, since the original deal was that she would fight on behalf of the weak ones. Vicious claims that a royal decree ordered her to dispose of all heroes who aren't capable of fighting, so Vicious wants Sober to train them so they can learn to kill monsters, and of course, if Sober refuses, Vicious will immediately dispose of her weak classmates, so Ayaka doesn't really have much of a choice here. She's forced to agree to Vicious' terms, and as she is leaving, Vicious points out that if any of her classmates become a hindrance to her, she may have to deal with them herself, but of course it's not like she wants to get rid of them or anything. Back to Touka, more time has passed and Ceres still isn't back yet, so either she ditched him or something happened to her, and considering how honest she's been thus far, the only possibility is that she got abducted. She has no reason to even want to lie to Touka in the first place because we gain nothing from doing so. As Touka is on his way to go looking for Ceres, he hears two guys talking about how Ceres' identity was revealed during the banquet, and she was forced to flee into the forest to escape, but Mills is organizing a hunting party to go after her, and this hunting party consists of the Black Dragon Knights. As the knights chased after Sarah's, she attempts to transform using her spirit regalia, but her spirit of light got disoriented with her disguise was destroyed, so she won't be able to transform for now and has to fight in base form. She manages to take out a couple of the lower-ranked knights, but it was really difficult for her, so she fears what might happen if one of the higher-ranking members were to attack her now. Just then, she notices an arrow being fired at her from behind, but she can tell that it is just a distraction, so she quickly rushes to face her real opponent, the Dragon Knight's vice-captain. He is a much tougher foe than the rest of them, so she struggles to defend herself, and she unfortunately loses her footing, so the vice-captain disarms her as she falls to the ground and gets on top of her. He is about to do unspeakable things, but before he actually does anything, Touka arrives and paralyzes him. Sarah is shocked to see Touka here, but she knows she's safe now, so she climbs out from under the vice-captain and Touka gives him a non-lethal dose of poison for good measure. Sarah asks Mimori why he came looking for her, but before their conversation goes any further, Touka puts the vice-captain into sleep so he can't overhear them. Sarah warns Touka that if he stays with her then he will be pursued by the Black Dragon Knights as well, so she's willing to return the gem he gave her and nullify their contract so that she doesn't cause him any trouble. Touka tells her that won't be necessary because for one he has a lot of those gems, so the money isn't an issue for him, but more importantly, he isn't going to find another bodyguard home he can trust like Sarah's, so he's going to stick with her. And right now, he needs Sarah's to take off her clothes. That brings the episode to an end. Thanks for watching. Want next part? Subscribe the channel and turn on notification bell.